Welcome, my friends. Happy Sunday. I'm Sergio, and I'm with Nick Sung. And welcome, Nick. Thank you for joining us again at another
Yeah.
set. Super happy to have you here. And welcome to everybody. I'm going to wait a little bit as people trickle in. I'm already seeing a lot of activity in the comments. Thank you guys for hanging out. This whole weekend has been just phenomenal. I'll just remind you guys, you can see the link on screen if you want to see some of the replays of the chats that we've been doing this whole weekend. You can see that at pro.storyboardart.org/LBX2020. And I'll also give a big shout out to those of you guys in the Drawing and Portfolio Challenge. As I already mentioned, the response has been incredible. So congratulations to everybody who's been doing that. It just means you're going to get better at your storyboards and improve there. And I think by now you probably know that the Story Artist Mentorship Program is open for registration. And our good friend here, Nick, is going to be a mentor in that program alongside myself. And man, you showed me something just behind the scenes that you're working on. I just got super excited. That pitch that you did was awesome. One of these days, there's a lot of confidentiality and things that we can't always show the work that we're doing. But I was blown away. So thanks for showing me that.
Oh yeah, happy to.
So this talk is all about how to break down a scene. Now, I will mention that, I should put up some links up on screen so you guys know what we're talking about. So this is actually the last day. I'll say this, a couple announcements before we get into this. This is the last day that you can register for this course. So if you guys want to sign up, this is a free course. It's all about storytelling. And we asked Nick to also join in the comments in the Facebook group. So hopefully we're going to see you, today and next week, whatever time you can spare, my friend. I know you're really, really busy. But go to bit.ly, bit.ly/storyboard challenge, and you guys can sign up there for free. And then I'll also mention this. I'll put this one up on screen. You guys, I'm like a broken record this weekend, but the Story Artist Mentorship, if you guys are interested in storytelling and improving your visual storytelling, you guys are going to want to check this out. And we'll take some questions about that in a second, once we get into the Q&A section of our talk. But how to break down a scene. Now, we've talked a little bit about this before, right, Nick? Like some of our method of how to do it. And I think what's reassuring to me sometimes is that when other kind of story artists talk about how they do things, that it's similar to the way I do it. And I'm like, oh, okay, great. Man, I think, okay, I was doing it right because they do the same thing. Because I think what's common with you and me, or at least I've heard you say, is that you do a lot of research, right, before you actually start and break down a scene or start a new sequence. Is that right?
I do as much research as time allows. Yeah.
And
so which means sometimes there's no time.
What do you do? Are you watching movies? Are you looking at books and photo reference? Like, what kind of things are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing all those things. I mean, most of the time we're not really needing to reinvent the wheel with the scene that we're making. There's been something somewhere that's been done before that's inspiring what we're doing. So it's like drawing back from all of the experience that I've had, like looking at things and watching things and doing things, and really, it can come from anywhere.
I'll admit to you guys a funny story. Like I do so much research that when I like something, I will like almost rip it off like completely, and not to the sense like I'm trying to copy something, but especially with like a fight scene or something, I see like some choreography I'll like, and mostly this is coming from like live action movies, like a Jackie Chan film or something, and then I'll redraw that in storyboards in my own sequence, and it's just a section, so unless you really know where that reference came from, you may not catch it. But then like I just completely ripped it off, and everybody's like, wow, great job, that looks amazing, where did you get, they think I came up with it, and really it's just because I've been doing research. I don't know if that's ever happened to you.
I try not to rip things off, but I think I make life more difficult for myself because I'm just like, I remember for one of my birthdays a bunch of years ago, I like wanted to make these recipes, these like Depression era, like 1920s recipes or 30s, I guess. And so I like found like 12 recipes and I read all of them and I was like, what's the essence of this recipe? And then I would like kind of take all my favorite bits and like make my own. And that's kind of the same way that I approach boarding. Like I'll just watch lots of scenes. I'll like, reference a lot of things. Then I'll kind of cherry pick. So
nice. And we had a brief discussion a little bit before we got started here, and you were you were telling us how, or you telling me how you were breaking down the time it takes you to actually create a scene. Can you tell this story that you had to do? I mean, is this something you can talk about?
Yeah,
the fact you had to do 40 minutes of a project in a crazy amount of time.
It's a weird place to start a conversation, but sure. Well, you know, maybe it's the best place to start our conversation, because storyboarding is work. And when you have this like work assignment, people are like, hey, how long is this going to take? And so part of breaking down a scene is saying like, okay, well, I need to start some sort of process to do this. And so over the summer, I was on a project that was like really tight, had a lot of pretty demanding constraints. And so I ended up getting super nerdy and detailed about how I organize my time, or else I wouldn't be able to get it done otherwise.
Yeah, but it's like that's being practical, right? That's just because you had to do it.
You know, yes, absolutely. But I think what I would have done earlier in my career is I would have just sat down and started, and I would have just like worked all night, and like I would have just sheer Forrest willed through it. And whereas this time it was like, I'm going to stay organized. I need to be deliberate. Here are the different parts. This is how much I'm going to spend, how much time I'll spend researching. This is how much time I'll spend thumbnailing. And then based on that, if I can make these awesome thumbnails, then I'll have really awesome boards. So it was actually a lot of it was like front loading the thinking to the planning stage.
I mean, I consider that part of breaking down a scene, right? Because you always have to meet your deadlines. I think, isn't that a common thing? I don't think I can't even think of the time where I've missed a deadline. If it has, it's been super rare. And if anything, like I've turned in something, like maybe it wasn't what I was super proud of, but that's like one of my, I don't know, professional pride kind of things that I'm going to turn it in no matter what. Right.
Yeah. Well, you know, of course, you want to try to hit your deadlines. It's just, I think that this is part of the professional practice of being a story artist that you don't really think about. Like it takes so much energy to learn all the artistic stuff, the creative stuff, that you're never like, what's my time allocation? Am I taking enough breaks right now? You know?
Yeah. And then the other thing that I think we're pretty similar on is I do a lot of thumbnails, and I think of that as like the thinking process. And I really go through just in my brain as many like ways that I can place the camera and move the characters around and stuff. Is that what's your process there? Is it something similar?
You know,
and you can tell me I'm totally wrong too. I'll take it.
I don't think you're wrong. I think mine's maybe a little bit more. It's focused in like maybe in a slightly different way. I think I like to imagine that thumbnail pass almost as like a set of best guesses, and then based on that, then I'll like sort of step back and reevaluate. So, you know, I think again, like doing everything I can to front load all of the analytic thinking. And then I think what I do is like look at the scene as a progression. It starts somewhere, it ends somewhere probably, and something important happens in the middle. And so it's sort of about like, how do we get to that important thing? And then how do we come out of that important thing? So that's like the most basic framework. And then based on that, then I'll come up with some sort of strategy that I'll try out. And then at that point, like what that strategy is, that's when I'll try different things. But it's all based around a sort of initial set of assumptions.
That's awesome. So you're thinking about like, is the scene arc, like how it's going to actually like flow through the scene? Is that what?
Yeah,
is that more what it is?
The scene arc, and also just like, yeah, I guess like as a dramatist, you know, like there's something that you want to walk away from the scene caring about or being provoked by. And so that's actually that dramatic node. That's actually the thing that I want to build around. So for me, all of the camera stuff, the cinematic stuff, it's like built on that framework. So I want to figure out that framework first.
Wow, cool.
Yeah.
What do you do if you get a scene that has none of that, and like you might have some just dry dialogue that has no subtext? Has that ever happened to you?
Oh, you find it. I don't know. Yeah, actually, that has happened to me. But okay, I'll tell you, I'm a bad kid in a lot of ways. There are times when I think that subtext is just very subtle. And in that case, you know, you got to do your due diligence and like talk to the director, talk to the screenwriter, be like, hey, what are you looking for? And come to the table with some ideas. But then when I'm a bad kid, sometimes I'm like, you know, it'd be great. This would happen here. And then I'll sometimes take my interpretation of that scene too far, because you got to own it. In the end, you want to own these choices. And so if nothing's there, then if the situation is right, I'll make it up.
Yeah. Wow, that's really cool that you say that. One of my go-to things when I get into a situation like, because I was working a lot in episodic TV, and man, sometimes they crank out these scripts and there was nothing for me to hook onto.
Yeah.
And just like that, I would add subtext, even though it wasn't necessary. I couldn't interpret that it was written that way. It was very like, you know, cut and dry.
Yep.
And matter of fact dialogue. And I would make the character evoke something that I felt that character, you know, I was doing Star Wars stuff or whatever I was doing, because that's what I think. And for those of you guys, let me just describe, maybe some of you don't know what subtext is. To me, it's the meaning behind what they actually say in the dialogue, and also with body language, right? Like, you know, the actual acting can also have a subtext to it. There's a double meaning, so to speak, when you do something. And then my go-to thing is if there's none of that, and I have to just do what's written there or whatever, my go-to thing is to really crank up the staging and the camera work and just the choreography of the characters around, just to make it visually interesting and move that scene along. Otherwise you get, I don't know, if it's a lot of dialogue, which I've had to do a bunch of times, I find it so horribly boring and difficult to come up with something if they're just sitting there or they're in a boring room. So then I'll invent that, you know, guys are getting up around, or maybe I tried this once, and this was kind of my solution was, I tried to have the camera constantly rotating 360 around a table, because it was a group of characters sitting at a table and they're having dinner and having a conversation. And the director didn't want me to move the characters. So then I just moved the camera. It was a nice slow move.
Clever.
I think it got cut up in the end, but anyway, that was my solution.
You know, I think that one of the reasons that I maybe have a different experience is because my first experiences as a board artist were in feature. And they're in feature at Pixar, so I don't totally know what it's like to be in house at, you know, some of these other big studios. But if a scene wasn't working, like, your job was to have an opinion about that, not just to like board it and let it go. And so, you know, I think that's one of the reasons why there was some amount of like, okay, I'm going to work with what's here, and some amount of like, no, I need to rise to the occasion. You know, what's the heart of this? And then you all get together in the scrum and you're like, but what is this about? What does this mean? Because, you know, that's how, I guess that's how you pull together as a team, really.
Yeah. It's nice to lean on other guys too. That's what happens in a feature studio. You're working with great guys, or, you know, theoretically see all other seasoned professionals, and you could be like, hey, you know, what would you do here? Or, you know, you get together in those meetings, right? I really enjoy that kind of collaboration, because it's, you know, sometimes my brain is fried and I just can't come up with ideas, right? How many times have you, or well, let me ask you this, like, when you're actually breaking down the scene, how many times do you, I'm assuming there's some kind of interaction with the director, or, you know, let's say supervisors that are on there.
Yeah.
Like, how do you approach that? Like, are you just going to let somebody talk? I mean, I guess it would depend on the style of the director too, but how do you approach that initial conversation when you get handed a scene?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it. You know, it's funny, maybe I've mentioned this to you before. When I started at Pixar, one of the very first things they said, day one, hour one, was you're here because you're a leader, but you're also here to follow. And it's not always going to be clear when it's time to do one or the other. And so what that implies is that you're necessarily in a collaboration, right? And so, like, your job is to support the film, support the production, support your colleagues and your friends in whatever way that you need to. So yeah, working with a director, sometimes you got to sit back and like just really listen. And then other times, I had a friend call it bedside manner recently. you know, it's like you need to like learn how to guide that person and have opinions and like disagree sometimes or
Yes.
quibble over a thing or be like, you know what, I think I know what you're after. Let me try some things.
Yeah, diplomacy is like it's a skill, right?
Yes, that's right. And so I think, you know, whatever your method is, it's like it's about like how do you get the best kind of feedback from the director, you know, and how do you set the right expectations for what they're going to see next. So that's definitely like a set of skills to learn.
Oh yeah, my go-to thing there is I'll form my opinion in the form of a question. So I'll be like, do you really think this character, or let me see if I can think of an example. Like, would this character, you know, do this in this situation? Wouldn't the character say something else? And then basically what I'm doing is I'm implying that a suggestion and then letting the director decide. Because I find that sometimes you work with people that have different, let's say different attitudes, different sensibilities too. And I've worked with some kind of sensitive directors where that if you try and criticize the work that they have already established, many of them are writers and things like that, that they'll take offense with that and they get on the defensive. And that's not my intention. It's basically to come to the story solution. And so I find that works for me in a lot of times where I'm not attacking it. Well, that sucks. You know, you should change this and that. No, wait, I'll let them figure it out. But really, I'm looking for the answer so that they can give it to me, and then I can go and do the work, right?
I don't know if I ever say anything sucks, but I definitely have a lot of other ideas for the way a scene can go. Yeah, you know, in the end, like these pieces of drama could go in any direction, like any direction, and like so much of filmmaking, you're trying to take this like unspoken, invisible thing that's in the director's imagination, and you're trying to make it material. Like that's magic and strange and whatever. You're some weird medium for this other person's imagination and for like the words on the page. And so, you know, I don't think you can expect, it to always be like a clear path to get to the scene. So you got to react, you know, and sort of feel it out. Yeah.
So let's say you get the notes, you had the meeting with the director, you've done your research, you kind of know what you're doing. What's the first thing that you would do? Is it just sitting down and drawing, or are there more steps to it that you would actually?
Oh my, I'm so slow. No, I mean, well, you know, I actually think that a lot of that planning that I do is in the research part. Some of the research I think is in looking at reference, as we've been talking about, but I think also some of it is in just like really sitting with the pages, sitting with the scene, the sequence or scene, and doing an analysis. Because you know, it's I think a thing that maybe you sort of over time develop a sensitivity for, but like you've got to compose those shots. You got to compose the cinematics so that they work within the context of the film. So it's like, I need to understand how the sequence fits in the bigger film. And then I have to understand like exactly what part of the machine the sequence is supposed to do. So I spend a lot of time in that research phase, like not just looking at visual references, but like, you know, looking at all of the materials, like looking at the set, looking at the characters, thinking about where in their emotional journey they are, and like what, you know, how things actually need to play, or how they, you know, could be blocked. So it's a lot of that kind of stuff for me up front.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that. That's something I do too. I forgot about that part, is the just researching the location. So I've worked a lot in 3D.
Can't forget that.
Yeah. And then, so like I'll look, like if I have the model, I'll look through the set. Like you can open up the 3D program and move the camera around, right? So the couch is over there, the window's over here. Okay. Oh, there's a fireplace. I can do something with that. You know, those kinds of things. One thing that was really difficult for me, I worked on, you know, some of you guys know I worked on this live action Little Boy movie. That was the one I was telling you about that I had to board out the whole thing in 3 months, which was terribly difficult. But I didn't have sets. I didn't have any designs. The guy, like, I worked directly with the director and the cinematographer, and they're like, okay, well, the bar is going to be like this, and then this interior is going to be like that, and then they would make a little quick sketch. I actually went to the set and I saw what they built, and after I went there, I was like, oh man, this is way smaller than I actually thought it would be. Like, things were much tighter, and I just, my own personal, I don't know, first reaction was to make things a little bigger than I thought. So that's one thing
Totally.
I learned, that I wished I had somehow had the opportunity to collaborate with a production designer who was building sets, and then maybe they could have passed me some architectural plans or something. But
yeah,
it worked out. Like, so what happened was I boarded out a scene that they like walked too long across the room. Like they just took up more time. So then we had to, like, you know, they had to do some creative work to condense that. You know, it was all figured out with the cinematography and stuff. But yeah, I love that suggestion of just looking at locations. Have you ever done stuff without any any character designs or any locations where they just give you a blank?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, but in those cases, similar to like when you get a scene where there, you know, isn't clear direction, you've got to make some clear direction. I mean, you know,
I love
get permission or ask forgiveness, but someone's got to make decisions, and in fact, that's you. so you gotta get there. Yeah.
That's awesome. I always say that, you know, do you agree with this? I always say that the story artist is a mini director. You're like a director of your scene, and you have to take responsibility of your sequence.
Yeah, for sure. Sure. Absolutely. Like 1,000%.
You know, yeah, you're right. Somebody has to make these decisions. And if it's not you, somebody else will. And so that's to me where it's like, oh, wait a minute. My pride gets in here. That character's going to sit here, and the camera's going to be there, and, you know, that kind of stuff. Right.
Yeah, to me, it just sort of seems like you know, it's just like a fun set of problems. Every film is a fun set of problems to solve. So it's like, okay, which one's today? All right. Yeah.
Right. How awesome. All right. So then that's cool. So then when you actually start, when you're drawing, let's talk a little more about technique. Like,
right, we'll get to drawing. Oh.
Yeah. There's something when you have to actually create these things. Do you have the models like up on your screen? Do you like, you know, if it's a 3D, they give you a 3D model, do you have that, or is it stills or whatever? Are you like with a couple screens comparing things, or you just, you look at it and you go, and you already have your ideas in your mind? Like, what do you actually do?
No, never. I'm so slow. You know, I think that, well, you and I were speaking about this before this chat. I think in the old days, I would have just sort of gone for it. And now, now that I've been around the block a few times, now I'm like, man, planning is super, super, super important. So yeah, you know, as far as like familiarity with like sets and models and all that stuff goes, that's like part of the prep. And then I'll keep the really pertinent stuff just sort of propped up on my screen or around. But then actually where I start drawing is, you know, once I've done this kind of like scene breakdown, sometimes it's like more explicit. Other times, did Sergio disappear?
I'm still here. Don't worry. Keep going.
I
just put you.
Where did it go? Okay, go ahead. Continue. I'm not familiar with the internet. Yeah. So anyway, once things start going, and I actually start drawing, I'll start with whatever I think the most important moment of that scene is. So that's where I'll start.
Wow, very cool. You know, that's something actually I don't do.
Oh, really?
Wow, awesome. See, I
just start at the beginning. Where do you start?
I just go from the beginning. I go from the beginning and knock it out. But I kind of have my targets. I know where I'm going. I know I'm eventually going to get to that. But now you're making me rethink how I should do it, because let me think about that. Yeah, because there's usually always a key moment in the scene. And, you know, I'm such a practical guy, and like I really, if you guys know me, I'm like hyper organized, and like I really like things like just all the ducks in the row. So if I were to start in the middle of the scene, I'd be like, oh, damn it. Now I have to go to the front, and I got to move this around, and I got to do it. So I just go this way. I go linearly, and I know I'm going to get to that target. But actually, you make an important point, is that there is an important moment in most every scene. And then that is like, that's the point of the scene, right? And then if you don't get that right, then the whole scene could be bust. So
that's right. But again, remember, I'm coming to boarding from the philosophy that all I can do is make best guesses. Like, yes, we are mini directors, but I'm not the director. Like do I get to play cinematographer? Sure, but I'm not a cinematographer. I'm not the actors. I'm not any of these things, but I can make best guesses. And so I'll make my best guess about that most important moment, that most important shot, and how exactly it should be performed and staged. And once I build these milestone or markers in the scene, then I can then I'll start from the beginning and I'll like work into a progression to that most important scene, and then I'll work out of it. But that isn't the movie yet. That's just those are just the thumbnails, and then I'll get someone to check my math, and work with me to like, okay, well, am I getting it right? Is this working? How do we make this better? So I'm not stuck on it. I'm not stuck once I get there.
That's great. So then how many iterations would you, well, I mean, it depends on the project, I'm sure, right?
Yes.
But right. Let's say you're going to do an initial pass, and then you would show that to somebody, either director, supervisor, or, even a producer, coworker. You want somebody else's eyeballs on it, right? Normally.
Yeah. Yep. Very often.
And then how many, let's say you get some notes that you feel are, well, usually when you're working with somebody else, director will have a clear vision. They'll absolutely give you some kind of notes. It's very rare. I don't know if, you're so awesome, this might happen to you, that the first time you do the sequence, it's like, it's already approved.
No, never.
I usually have to do 2 and 3 versions till we get it right. And that's just a process. Like, actually, I love what you just said. It's just like that, being open to the flexibility of the changes. I remember, you remember Rob Gibbs. I took a class with him when he was teaching back when I was in college, and he was the first one that I heard it from. He said, storyboarding is storyboarding. The RE that's in the middle of that phrase is you got to do it over and over and over again. Did it go right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Missed that guy, but
yeah,
that's true, right? You have to do it over and over again, right?
You know what though? You also need to respond to the needs of production. And so this is where that nerdy, organized, OCD time tracker part of me clicks in, because it's like, well, if I'm working on a TV show and this literally needs to be done by Friday and there's no chance for do-overs, then you're going to get it done. If you're working, in feature and you have, you know that you're going to have 5 chances to do this. I remember Rob Gibbs talking, I think he boarded the snow cone scene or the abominable snowman scene in Monsters Inc. Didn't he do that 14 times or 20 times or something?
Sure.
Yeah. So, in that case, it's whatever it takes to get it right.
I know.
Different world.
That kind of, it's like the first time you do it, it's like the drawings are really tight and you're like, yeah, it's great. You got all these tones. And then by the 15th time, it's just like these random sketches. It's all Frankenstein together.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, hey, it still works, right? It's the end product.
But you know what? Let me just add though, that I think the other thing about those contexts is that the end product is different. Because in feature, again, I don't know what Rob's experience was like on that film, but I bet you he's testing the story. That's what he's doing. He's trying to figure out, how do I get this moment to work? How do I get this funny? How do I hit the right emotional notes? That's very different from, where do I put the camera, right? And I think in projects or with projects where there are really tight constraints, I think it's a lot more tactical. It's like, I need this to happen. This is how it's going to happen. We got to move on to the next thing,
Yeah. Yeah, you make a good point too about the collaboration. I remember when I first started doing live action, and I ended up seeing the results of some of the scenes that I would do with the actors. Like I would see them act. And I was actually quite surprised, because I hadn't worked that much with actors. And they're also professionals, and they really brought it. And I was like, wow, these guys are great. It's one thing you see things in theater or you see a live performance, but to be so close to somebody, they've read your lines and they give their own interpretation. They really have thought about the motivations of these characters as well. And then it changed the story. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. This is different from what I just did. But I didn't, I thought it was better, because they really brought, they turned that character to life, obviously, because that's what their job was. But I was really impressed with that. I thought,
that's great.
Yes, as somebody that I thought it would go this way, it actually went another way, but it came out better. And I really have to admit that,
Well, I mean, this is plussing, right? And this is one of the really, magical things about animation. And it really is. you know, you follow your instincts, you're analytical, you make your best guesses, and somebody brings something new, and then you all go like, oh, okay, and it just keeps like building on itself. Like that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Cool. Let me, if you don't mind, do you have anything else to say to that? Because there's a bunch of questions that are coming up here, and I thought I'd pull this up with just some of the things that are happening here in the chat. And by the way, if you guys have any questions, go ahead and put that in there. We'll hopefully we'll get to all of these, or as many as we can. And let me, this one is from Ryan. Hey Ryan, what's up, buddy? How do you guys deal with roadblocks on a deadline? I don't know if you can see that on screen, but Ryan is asking, how do you deal with roadblocks on a deadline?
What's a roadblock? Is that when you like don't have the answer?
Are you talking about like just like a brain freeze, or do you mean like them people changing the script? You know, maybe we can clarify some of that.
Is that like writer's block?
Or, well, let's take it in that direction. What do you do when you're out of a loss for ideas?
Well, I think that, you know, again, for better, for worse, I think that my habit, because we're making these little constructions, is to start with a plan. And so if you start with a plan, your job at that point is just to execute the plan. You know, but you got to put a stake in the road. I don't know. That's not the phrase. The ground, stake in the ground.
Yeah.
Up front, and then there kind of like are no roadblocks. There's doubt, maybe. There's like showing it to people and they react funny, but then you've got something that you can talk about. So I think that commitment up front is the thing that like allows me to power through so I can get to a point where I can get some feedback.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Let me bring this up from Kumar. And if you have anything more to add along the way, certainly jump in there, Nick. But how much characters and their behavior one needs to understand before starting the boarding? So I interpret this as like the character motivations and stuff, right? What kind of research do you do for the characters, or do you need to draw them first and get used to like the models and that kind of thing when you work?
Yeah. Partially because I'm not so great at drawing, so it takes me a minute to like get warmed up. Oh, no, it's so true. And I think also because like for me, I'm like a specific kind of drawer though. I don't think I draw consistently every time. So if you look at my boards over time or artwork over time, it's like shifting depending on the production and like the needs of production. But to answer the question, you know, obviously the longer you're on a project, the more comfortable you are, like the more knowledge you'll have. From the start though, you know, you're starting from scratch. And so again, if you do as much research as you can, make your best guesses. And then I think a lot of the time what happens is that you find those things in the scene. You know, one of the things that Aristotle said sort of is, action is character, right? And so the cool thing about working on a scene is that it's about something. It's about a character who like wants to do something and is in fact doing things out in the world. So those first sequences, those are your chance to like try things out and find the character. But you got to be like, I think, thoughtful and active about making choices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And this follow-up to that too is like, Kumar is also asking, the scripts usually do not guide about the shot choices, right? How do you work them out? So yeah, in a normal script, I don't know if you guys know this, but there are really like very few camera notes, and it's just dialogue and action, right? I don't know if you've had, and sometimes they're even looser than that. It's like I've seen things which was like just an outline, or sometimes it's like on a napkin, like a table napkin or something. But right, so this is really, I think, the heart of what we're doing here. We're making those choices as story artists. We're the ones thinking of the shot setups. Has that been your experience as well, Nick?
Yeah, and in fact, this is such a great question. I mean, these are all great questions. The reason that I do so much of that planning up front is because I want to have the right dramatic framework in mind so that I can create those shot choices, because they're not explicit. So if I can get into the scene and figure out what is this really about, what's really important, how am I supposed to feel, then I can build around that structure. Mm-hmm. Like if you have a scene where all of the shots are static camera, and then all of a sudden in this most important scene, you know, the camera like pushes in, it's like, okay, well, that's, I guess something important's happening here.
Yeah.
So the technical choices, the camera choices, they're built off of that dramatic analysis. That's why I front load that.
Wow, cool. Yeah, I love that. And then what do you do if you don't agree with some of the notes that are given to you in a, you know, with a pitch or some kind of story sequence?
You talk it out, or you do what you're asked to do, and then you talk it out later. Or if you have enough time on your hands, you go and you make your own version of it. So if you have a lot of time on your hands, you can make an alt. You can make an alt, which is a thing.
Yeah, I think you know, I come out from the angle that we are there to execute the director's vision. Unless you're the director, then you get to kind of make those choices. But you're there to execute the director's vision, and in that sense, you know, it's important to be supportive of the people that you're working for. And I think there's always going to be differences in opinion. But maybe that's one argument to kind of select your jobs well, and also kind of, you know, get on a project that you're going to want to be part of rather than always trying to fight the, you know, the trend there, because I don't think that's very, very productive just in general. That's another, you know, practical solution to things, right? What do you think about that?
Well, you know, and I also think this is just like part of, you know, there's an intimacy to like working with people. I mean, there is, like, these are human relationships too. And so, you know, the director is trying to like figure out the best way to work with you, and you're trying to figure out the best way to work with the director. So, you know, if you were working with them over a long enough period of time, you can figure out like when it's time to just sort of be quiet and sort of do what you need to do. And you can tell when it's, you can choose when it's time to maybe like push something or try something or volunteer something. But, you know, you grow into it. Yeah, like any relationship.
Right. Yeah. Now, I didn't ask you to prepare anything for this, Nick, but I thought it would be a good idea to show you guys kind of what I was talking about. And since I mentioned a couple of times that Little Boy project, would you mind if I showed you a scene? And I would love to hear your opinion of this stuff too. This was like, let me bring this up. Let me adjust my monitors here for a second as I pull these things up. Here we go. Cool. There it is. So let me see if I can make this bigger.
Is this Adobe Bridge?
This is. Yes. I exported some Braid. Yeah. You know, I'm a big fan of the Adobe CC package. I think, you know, there's mixed reviews there with some people, but I think just the flow and the way that these programs connect nowadays, like Adobe's connecting with After Effects, and you can bring it into Premiere and stuff.
Sponsor us, Adobe.
Yeah, thank you. How about you give us some free software there? These are thumbnails. And so this is an example of what I was telling you about, Nick, before. I had to knock these out. I was doing one page every 2 days, one full script page. And if for you guys who know what that's like, it's tremendously fast to do that. And you can see how sketchy and rough these are. And basically what I did was, out of these thumbnails, I just put some tones behind them, and that just kind of popped things out. That was really all we had time for. And then this is a scene with a mom and the little kid whose name is Little Boy, that's his nickname, and his brother London. And they had a little fight, and he just kind of storms out of the room. And then this kid, he is short, so then I always try to hide, you know, and enhance that kind of thing about it. And she actually picks him up, but he's like, I think he's like 10 years old or something, but he's, you know, he's kind of shorter than the rest of the kids. So she's like kind of handles him like a rag doll, puts him on the bedside, and then they have a little conversation about their dad. But as simple as this is, like the thinking process, it took me a while to actually bang this stuff out. And look how simple and just reduced down to the most like basic of elements in the shot, because there really wasn't much time for it. So I think, to me, my decisions had to be that much sharper, you know, to get things done. I don't know if you've ever had that kind of experience, Nick.
I mean, that has been my entire year.
Just to give the guys background, you did like 40 minutes. You did something similar, I think even faster. How many pages were you knocking out in a day or two?
Yeah, just to give everyone context, Sergio, I was apologizing to Sergio for disappearing for the entire summer. And I was like, I just boarded, I don't know how many. I think it was like 40 pages, something almost. Actually, yeah, something like that. Pretty close. 35 to 40 pages in a couple months. So it was pretty much a scene every few days.
Yeah, I mean,
Maybe a week.
To give people context, like I feel if I had like 2 weeks to do one page, I would be like, okay, this is comfortable. Like I can think about it, I can do my research, I can like actually work, I can make my drawing pretty, right? But no, sometimes you just have to, that just so people understand that like the time you have to condense. So what you normally get a week, okay, I'd say a week for a page. But damn, to do it in a day, in 2 days, that's an incredible amount of work.
It was a lot of work. I mean, certainly faster than I would prefer to work. But I will say one of the really cool things about getting to a certain level of I don't know, experience, mastery, something, skill level with boards is that I was able to sort of flex. I don't know if that's the right word. The way that I would engage with the process. So there were some parts where I would just have like one board and I'd be like, the character talks a bunch and acts a bunch here, and then other times where I just sort of like reacted to the needs of the scene. It's like, here there's going to be a bunch of performance. Here it's purely cinematics. It was always clear enough. The boards were always clear, but I was able to dial up and down how much detail I put, and that was a big help too.
Yeah, cool. Let me go to some of these questions. There's great questions here, and we'll try and get to some of these. I think this is a great time to start this Q&A section. So Emiliano is asking, how does a week in the life of a story artist look like in a studio like Pixar or Lucasfilm? They're different studios there. So how many frames are you expected to deliver every day? That's a really common question. But okay, let's see if you want to. Well, okay, how about I'll jump on this one. I'm always throwing you the questions first.
No.
So at Lucasfilm, the last time I was there, I was working on the Star Wars Resistance project, which was an animated episodic TV show. Each episode was about 21 minutes, and they were doing it for broadcast TV. It wasn't meant for streaming at that point. So we had to do a whole episode with the team. I was directing the episodes. And so I also had to take on a chunk of the work. So I was doing about 7 script pages in about 8 weeks. Okay. So that's almost like a page a week. And then I had unfortunately, as a director, you have to correct other guys too, fortunately or unfortunately. So then I had to supervise those guys. And then sometimes I had to pick up the slack. If some guys were working on a really hard sequence and they just didn't have time for something else, then I would have to take that and fix it out. So I remember doing sometimes like 10 pages in those 8 weeks. And that's why I say it's like, then I had like 3 or 4 days to do a full script page. And that was action stuff. It was really heavy. So there wasn't an amount of frames that you had to deliver per day. It was more like by week 5, you had to do the rough initial pitch for the sequences that you had. And then you had 3 weeks after that to clean everything up. So, and then, in between then there was meetings and talks with, the supervising director and everything else there. Yep. So that's really, really accelerated. I think at Pixar, you guys have a much, when you're working on feature, you have a much more extended schedule, right? So what's it like at Pixar? Maybe I'll let you say something.
You walk in and you make some tea and you get some cereal.
I remember they had, did they still give out the free cookies at 3:00 when I was, it was like the cafeteria had the extra cookies and they would just let you get it. So everybody get up and walk and grab some cookies from the cafeteria.
I do remember cookies. It was a long time ago. I think that it is true that the pace at Pixar was like glacial, I would call it. But, that is like on the whole. And that's like, again, like based against or like in comparison to like other things where, you might need to work a lot faster. To answer your question, though, With a non-answer, again, because this is a collaboration, they're looking to cast you on a scene, right? On a piece of work. And especially at the beginning of your career, they don't really know how you work or what you can do. Again, like best guesses. And so you'll get assigned a scene. Maybe it's 2 pages, maybe it's 4, maybe it's not 7 or 10. But some reasonable scene, and they'll be like, so what do you think? Can we see it past Wednesday? And then you go and you do the thing, and hopefully you get it done by Wednesday, and your supervisor checks in on you, and it's again, you're building a relationship and setting expectations. And you know what? If you're a speedster, then you'll know, and they'll figure it out pretty fast. And if you need more time, they'll also realize that, and and there you go. And yeah, you work as fast as you work. So I love that's really up to you.
That's, I think, isn't that a nature of the way that the process is set up? Because the expectations are extremely high, right? It's not like you can go to the pool every day and just to hang out and screw around. Like you
I
actually
go to the pool every day.
Yeah, me too. That was always awesome. When I love those extracurriculars. See, that's the one thing I should say. I'll bring this up in a second. But working at these, there's another question about Pixar, and then, I think both of us have been very fortunate in our careers to work at these very high level and established companies. And I just feel lucky that it's very luxurious. Like I worked at Skywalker Ranch, and have you been to Skywalker, by the way, Nick?
No.
Man, it's incredible. It really is wonderful there. And yes, I was at the pool.
Well, I will say, I actually do want to circle back to the question. It is luxurious, but it's also just like it is luxurious, but it's also it's a lot of sitting. The job's a lot of sitting, and so these studios, they want you working with them, collaborating for the long hauls. They're like, man, be healthy, live a balanced life, do other things, move around. Why don't you move around and go outside a little bit?
Yeah, exactly.
Can I just add one thing to that last question?
Absolutely.
Very briefly.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of like how many pages you get done, I think that's what we were talking about.
Yes.
Is that what it was?
Yes. How many frames you expected a day, or the equivalent?
That's right. Again, I was saying that at Pixar, the expectation is that you'll work as fast as you'll work. But the hope, the level of quality that you were referring to, Sergio, has to do with the quality of the scene. It's not just like, did you get this thing done? It's like, is this working? Is this like hitting the emotional notes? That's actually what they're looking for. So if you can get that done in a couple of days, great. But if you need a few passes to get to that, then that's what you need.
Yeah, I always say don't cover up substance with technique, and what I mean by that is no amount of fancy rendering is gonna fix your scene. And if you're sitting there doodling and creating shadows and portraiture in your storyboards, hopefully your scene is just as good, because that's really what's important, right?
Yeah, and it's in the end, like, yes, of course there are expectations, but it's not just about getting the thing done. It's about getting it done so that it's meaningful, so that it has impact, or else it's just a bunch of stuff, or else it's not ready yet. So,
yeah. Let me move on to this question from this one from Sai that I saw. So, let me repeat the question here. Does Pixar have story artist training program just like Nickelodeon? I've never heard of such a thing, but if any, it would be great if you can tell us. I remember because I spoke to Ted Mathot, who was a story director, a story supervisor there, right? And he told me that they had an internal, and I think if I remember correctly, you told me that you were part of this training program in Pixar University which is their internal training program to train the story team. Yeah. And I think I have my numbers wrong, but he told me it was 3 months and it was full-time, 40 days a week, 40 hours a week in
40 days a week.
40 days a week, right? In training the interns. And after that, there was obviously no guarantee that you were going to be selected as part of the story team. And I really loved that idea that you were just so saturated and you were being trained by the other story guys, which are seasoned pros. So can you talk a little bit about that? And does Pixar have an internal training program?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is relevant to people in particular who are students. I mean, there is the internship program, and that is a sort of story training apprenticeship sort of setup. Obviously, it's only available to you if you're a student, and my understanding is that it's extremely competitive to get into, but it's really intensive and really fun, and it's like super awesome story summer camp at a great place with nice people, and extremely rigorous. On the inside, when you join the company, there is training up front. There are lots of opportunities to like share knowledge sort of informally within the flow of work. And then obviously there's like Pixar University, where the classes like change all the time. But yeah, so I don't know, the internal stuff, it's there once you're inside.
Yeah. So what I was getting at is that just one, the intensive training that you have, and I want to relate this to the mentorship, the stuff that we're going to be doing, is that you can't get this information unless you're on the inside. So, and it is extremely competitive, because I know people who have tried to apply and stuff, and there are like probably hundreds, if not thousands of artists that try to apply for this. I always say this too. I think it's like, I don't know if you agree or not, Nick, but I think it's probably like 70, 80, I would even say 90% of those applicants don't have the presentation or the formation, the story skills ready in order to compete at that for what they're looking for, because, it's just not organized. They haven't done the sequences and all that kind of stuff. And then, you're left with that, let's say that last 10%, that might be like 100 artists that are actually pretty good, and you have to select from that. And then, then it's like, they're only picking 3. Okay. Or, 1 or 2. So then, look at the odds of that. So what we're trying to do in this mentorship, and I'm so happy that you're going to be part of this, Nick, is that we are both going to take you through exercises that are going to help your portfolio get strong. And we're going to talk about these things that we're talking about here, which is to get your storytelling and thinking process in the right place, so that you can have the confidence to make the decisions and create good quality story work on your own. Now, there's no guarantee that you're going to get a job anywhere. But I'm seeing, I love it when I see my ex-mentorship guys on here, the past mentorship alumni that sometimes participate in the chats that we have here. And I love hearing the messages when they say they got freelance jobs. And I know a couple guys, like, one guy got hired by Disney TV. Another guy is doing like a live action film work. And I think it's just phenomenal that, I said this before, I cannot take credit for the work that they have done. They've done the work. They've created the portfolio. But I think it's important to have some kind of guidance to tell you what you should be looking at and how to design your portfolio, and also the skills that you are, let's say, lacking, and strengthen those, right? And then so when you get to working on a script or working in film and entertainment, that you have the ability to break down a scene, kind of like what we're talking about here, right? Anyway, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. I went on a little rant there.
No, that was nice. That was nice. I do have I have one thought. I'm gonna lead with a question though. How many professional storyboard artists do you think there are in the US?
I think I calculated that once, and I was just, to me, it's a big estimation. I don't think there's more than like 10,000. In fact,
10,000?
Yeah. Dang. Well, I'm also factoring in like video games and live action film and freelance work.
Sure.
So it's not so feature work. There's like, I think, what is it? There's probably less than a couple hundred, right? Who are doing, because you figure there's like 5. Correct me on my numbers here. There's probably 5 or 6 on a team. There's probably like at any one company, like a Disney, Pixar, DreamWorks, Blue Sky, whatever.
A handful of teams. Yeah.
There might be, 5 teams or so. So there might be like 100 people, right? And then some support guys here and there. Let's be generous and say there's 120 story guys in a company, right?
That's a big company. Yeah.
Right. That's a big company. So there might be 50? How many were there at Pixar?
I think when I was there, we cracked 50.
50 story guys in a company that's that well known, right? So there's a very select few of people that get to be on the inside, right?
Yeah. So the piece of advice that I was going to give is that sometimes, and I mean this as an encouragement, but I think one way to like wrap my head around like thinking about what it means to like compete for an internship or compete for a position, and is to like think about the long-term training that goes into being a professional. I just did some quick Googling, and according to the internet, there are, just under 200,000 like university professors in the US. There are 1,026 Major League Baseball players. There are 450 NBA players. So like,
wow, right.
And there are how many? 48 active astronauts. So like, think about the kind of training. I mean, I'm not saying that these things are equivalent by any means, but I do think that they are like some sort of, there's some sort of like high level professional echelon, I guess. So yeah, there are times when I'm like, man, competitive, super competitive, but what does it take to be an NBA player?
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be the best. You got to train all the time. You've got to like have all the skills. You need to be disciplined, and it's not going to be easy,
Right. I always say that good qualified story candidates are hard to find. Every time we try to hire for story teams, the first thing we would do was ask internally for the people working on the crew if they knew anybody who was available, right? And then after that, we do like a broader search, and then eventually they'll open it up to the public and put a public posting for whatever company, right? And the portfolios that you get, it's like really, I think it was almost like 70% you could just brush aside because they did not have the skills necessary to do the work. I could see that really quickly, especially on having to work with these teams, is like their staging skills, their camera setups were even the framing sometimes. So those were like more basic kind of things. And then when you're actually talking about the higher level stuff, is can they solve the story problems with these characters? That's when, to me, it was a little bit questionable with some of the things that you would see in these portfolios. So the few that would actually come through the door that you're like, oh, wow, oh, whoa, this guy's really good. So those guys really stick out. And those people are the ones you immediately call. And those are the ones, to me, that were always in demand. Like either they're always working, or they had like multiple offers from different companies. Because,
you know what, though? I will say it is a big world. And I really love baseball. And one of the ways that baseball works, right, is that there's always a new crop of kids. There's always someone new. Like everyone who plays is a legit athlete. So if you're boarding, you're not just like throwing that workout into the ether. Like you've got something special. And so it's like, what is that strength? And how can you develop it? How can you like build your full game? And so in the context that you're talking about, like, yeah, people are building their team, but it isn't all just like senior people. It's also like, who's up and coming, who's doing some interesting work, who can we take a chance on? You know what I mean? Who's like ready for like a little promotion or a step up? Who's new? That's definitely pretty real too. And part of building those professional relationships, I think personally, is also mentorship, and that's a thing that I think is really important in the animation industry, and has been since the beginning.
Do you have anybody in your career that you would consider a mentor, somebody that maybe brought you up or guided you?
Oh yeah, I'm only exist as a person because of mentors. I had a mentor when I was 14. I started taking drawing classes, and me and my friends were sort of taken under the wing of this one fellow named Carlos Nunes, and he was like the first person to sort of like really guide my development, and then from there was a fellow named Graham Bibby, who's an oil painter, and once I got into the industry, it was Ronnie Del Carmen, who was an incredible leader and inspiration and teacher.
Yeah, Ronnie's amazing. He directed. Did he co-direct Up, or he was story supervisor on it?
I think he co-wrote the screenplay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And then he's since directed a bunch of things. Yeah, he's amazing. Let me think about that. I have a ton of mentors that I could say. One of them was Rob Gibbs. I think I took his initial class. Yeah, he was amazing. He was so funny. He's just really sharp. When I started working in the industry too, I went to Spain and I worked at the Sergio Pablo's spa animation studios, and Borjan Montoro is an amazing.
That's crazy.
I wouldn't say he was my mentor, but he was there in the studio, so I was like, through default, just soaking in everything that he could do. Great, amazing animator. And then Sergio Pablos, of course, another Sergio, was great. He didn't take credit for anything. I kept telling him, oh man, thank you, because he was teaching me animation at the time. And I was, oh, thank you. This is really great. I was so helpful that these guys were giving me these nuggets.
Yeah.
Right? But this is what happens when you're inside the studio. And then story work. I have to give a lot of credit to some of the guys that I've been around. There's I don't want to date them, but they've been around the block, let's say, longer than me. And Robert Valley is a good guy that I met in San Francisco. I look up to the work he does. I love what he's doing. He's great, creative, maverick kind of guy. Stuart Lee, that I worked with at Lucasfilm, was another guy that mentored me, and I was on his team for a while. And he's great. He's a really, really excitable, great action guy.
Yeah.
So
man, you've got such a great list of people, and it reminds me that that on every production, almost like you make friends, and like you learn from other people. There are a lot of you meet a lot of great people along the way.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think we're almost at the end of the time here, and I will say, let me put this back on screen. If you guys are interested in any of the things that we're talking about, this is the conversation that we're going to continue inside of the mentorship. So I would highly recommend you guys check out the page that we put up on screen. To me, I can't wait, Nick. It's going to be fantastic. The response has been overwhelming with people who are asking questions about the mentorship and want to be part of this. If you guys are really interested in visual storytelling, the one thing that I think is very special about this program, when I started, we initially did the first run in 2018. I was blown away by the response from the students and the enthusiasm that we had, and the networking that happened within that group was tremendous. Those guys are still around. I still keep in contact with them. They still have a private Facebook group that we set up. And that to me was remarkable. We went for a full year, and we're also going to do that in this new mentorship program. I don't know very many story, kind of story courses or story programs that are doing this. And the reason we're going for a full year is that it gives you guys that are working professionals, that have family, that have other obligations, to do the work and also participate with us. And we are going to do what we're calling, well, I call them live reviews, but really they're dailies, right? You're familiar with animation dailies and film dailies, right, Nick? Is that when the way that works is you go into a room with the directors and supervisors, you present your work. And in fact, you showed me a pitch you did today, which I was so excited about, a pitch that you did for a project. And one of these days you have to release that and show everybody else. You're an awesome pitch man.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
At any rate, you go into these rooms and then, you present your work, and the directors and supervisors will give you feedback. And, the other guys will also sometimes chime in depending on how it's set up. You take those notes, you go back and you correct it in the next round, whenever it's your turn again, you do that. And that's what I'd like to set up in these live reviews, is that we're pitching these story assignments that we give you, so that you take our feedback and then you can go and improve on it. That's the way I learned as a young artist. And I was always so thankful when people would destroy my work. Like, literally, it sounds kind of like, I don't know, self-deprecating, or maybe it's like misogynistic, and it's like, oh yeah, give it to me, I want you to tear me up. But that was the way I learned. It was from them really going through my sequence and giving me the feedback I needed to make it better, and
yeah. I mean, I hope it wasn't misogynistic.
Right.
It probably wasn't that, but I don't know that I've personally ever received feedback that has been where my work has been destroyed, but I definitely have felt like devastated by by critique before. Yes. But that's like part of it, and like I won't say that you necessarily like learn to grow a thick skin, but man, over time you like learn to roll with it, and like you realize that each of those opportunities to get feedback is an opportunity to learn. So yeah, I'm pretty excited for this mentorship.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for listening to this chat. I think that'll do us for today. You can see the replay on our YouTube channel and on Facebook. And we look forward to having you in the Drawing Portfolio Challenge that I mentioned earlier. And then Nick will be around next week to actually take a look at some of those, to look at that work. So you guys want to sign up today, because today is the last day for registration. If you have any mentorship questions, we'll be around too, and I'll be fielding those. And as we leave, I'm going to give you a little snippet of a little short trailer, 30 seconds for the mentorship. All right, guys, thanks for hanging out. And Nick, you're awesome. I always love chatting with you.
Yeah.
Thanks, my friend. Please hang out for a second,
Sure.
off camera, and we'll chat. Guys, take care and have a wonderful day. We'll see you.
The mentorship experience has been the best learning experience that I've ever had about story.
It was a game changer.
Yeah, this last year, it's sort of felt like it's been an extension of my schooling experience, as far as I think the consistency of work, the challenge of the assignments, again, the feedback, which has been so great and appreciated.